Hey everyone, Dockwell here, and welcome to another video. Today's video we're going to be going over the patch gameplay update 7.32c, and I said in my tier list last week that I didn't think there was going to be a patch if there wasn't a patch last week, and I'm actually really surprised that they dropped this patch like now, Tuesday, because I think it's like a week and a half until the start. Maybe it's like next Thursday that the last chance qualifier starts. So it's kind of interesting that they dropped this patch with so little time between now and that TI. I mean, it's not TI technically in a way of like, it's not the main competition, but it is part of TI. So I'm a little bit surprised by that. But regardless, I actually think this isn't the biggest update. So I'm not really that upset that obviously they dropped this patch right after my tier list, because I don't think it has the biggest impact, a huge impact. Because like I said in those videos as well, I don't really think that if they do drop a patch, it's going to be like groundbreaking. It's just going to be some minor nerfs and some minor buffs to the best and the worst heroes, etc. So that's pretty much what happened. So regardless, anyway, let's just jump into all the changes. And like usual, I'm just going to go quickly through all the changes, kind of going to highlight what they did for each hero. I'm not going to go into too much detail, but just a little bit of overall detail to make the video relatively short, but cover everything that is important. So first, the general changes are all fixes. So if you see here, there's a lot of fixes with some of the new stuff, like the Ag Scepter for Doom and things like this. A lot of just weird interactions that they fixed. And they've been doing this recently in the last few patches, which is pretty good, because a lot of stuff in Dota seems to be broken like half the time, especially when they introduce something new to the game. So just a bunch of fixes. You can go read through those if you want to, but I don't think there's anything super crazy in here that I've seen that makes it, that is like game-breakingly, oh, this is so much better now. It's just more like bug fixes. So that's the main general changes, and then we can go into item changes here. And basically, Bloodstone is buffed because this item is terrible and nobody buys it. The only hero that buys it is Lich, and that's not going to change because it's literally just a terribly designed item that only one hero likes to buy, which is Lich. I mean, maybe Pudge could get it. Some other heroes maybe, but like Lich is pretty much the only one, and they're just buffing it. So this actually just, I think, makes Lich better. Lich was already kind of good, just middle of the road, but this makes Lich better because Lich likes to buy it, so keep that in mind. And then basically, Refresher Orb and Refresher Shard now share cooldowns, which is really important because now you basically can't get 3 ultimates, which is, something that was obviously pretty OP. If you could get a Refresher Orb and then you get one from Roche, you basically would have 3 ultimates, 3 Zeus ultimates plus his Nimbus and Ags, and then 3 Chronospheres or 3 Dooms, whatever it is, 3 Black Holes. It just was super overpowered. So now that they share the cooldown, it just makes it less valuable to get a Refresher Shard, or maybe you want to, bank on getting a Refresher Shard from Roche so you don't get the actual Refresher Orb yourself, that kind of thing. It just makes it a little bit more of a trade-off. Also, it doesn't tick down while it's in your backpack, which is an important change, because basically what you would do is you don't really, like, Refresher Orb doesn't give you anything other than regen, so sometimes people keep it in their actual inventory to get that regen occasionally, but by the time you have Refresher Orb late game, usually regen is not like that important. Like, it's not like you need it a lot. Some people just need it for the mana, I guess, but other than that, it's just kind of useless. So putting it in your backpack is a good way to keep it with you, and it obviously would count down. In the past, it would count down quicker or slower, but at least you had it there and you could have another item, so it's like you can have 7 items, that kind of thing. Well, now you just can't do that anymore. I think it does still count down on the courier and stuff like that, so you might see kind of weird things where people put the Refresher Orb in courier, have it count down, then give it back to them, all that kind of stuff, but it just makes Refresher Orb a lot less valuable, and it was, in the last 6 months or so, Refresher Orb has been probably one of the best late game items. So now people are just not going to buy this item nearly as much, I think, because of all these different little changes. It's still going to be good on certain heroes, obviously. I still think you're going to get it on, like, Enigma, but it just makes getting that a little bit less valuable, and it also makes those heroes that like to get it not as good, which they were already kind of trending in that way. So we'll see in TI, maybe it'll make heroes like Enigma and all that kind of stuff kind of drop out of the meta. Probably not fully, but maybe a little bit more than they otherwise would. So that's item changes. Obviously, I spent a good time on that, but I think those are pretty important because it's interesting to know, because They obviously have been changing Refresh Orb a lot, and it's been pretty popular. Next, we have neutral item changes. Basically, these two items are just terrible. I literally would never, ever, ever, ever use them because who wants minus 20% mana? Like, nobody wants that. If you have a lot of mana, you don't want that. If you have a little mana, you don't want that either. So it's like, you never want this item. So now they made it 15%. I still think it's terrible. It needs to be like 10% for it to be like good, I think. Otherwise, I mean, the cast range is good, but like whatever. I don't want the minus mana. Then this, obviously you're sacrificing 100 health, which is pretty significant early on in the game. So that amount of attack speed and stuff is just, I don't think it really, or the damage isn't really that good for the health, I think, on most heroes, other than maybe like Huskar. But so this definitely needed a buff too. I don't know if these items are necessarily good now. I'll have to see and how they feel in the game. It's kind of a feel thing with these items. So, but they definitely needed buffs because the penalties for using them or having them were way too big for the level that they're at, like early on. Next, we have neutral creep changes. Just small nerfs to this neutral creep for like Doom and Enchantress and Chen, that kind of stuff. I think Chen's really, really good, or at least was really, really good, so it makes sense they're going to do that. A very good early creep to have, so they just nerfed it. Axe, basically, just this hero's been getting buffed and buffed and buffed. I think this hero's actually undervalued in the pros. I would say look for this to be like a sleeper pick at TI. Just look for this to potentially be one of these heroes that people have been experimenting with and come into TI and say, like, I'm going to pick my Axe. I'm going to pick Axe and actually snowball the game out of control. Because if you can get a good game with this hero and you can get some like ultimate kills, man, this hero just feels unkillable with physical damage. Like, it can feel really, really good to play Axe. Obviously, he still has his problems, but they just keep buffing him. Now his base damage is increased by 3, like his battle hunger thing, that they're trying to like push this battle hunger kind of build onto this hero, and I think it's just getting better and better. Like, there's going to be a tipping point where Axe becomes like one of the best offlaners. I don't know if it's now, but it might be soon. Next, we have Batrider. Batrider seems to just always be in the meta. He seems to be always like A or S tier, a really great mid hero, and they're just nerfing it again because they changed it last patch to let Sticky Napalm do damage. Now they're kind of like nerfing other parts of the hero to make it not S tier, not insane like it was. So the cast range is nerfed, and the knockback distance is decreased on Flame Break. Cast range was nerfed on Sticky Napalm. And yeah, overall, I think those are just small nerfs. Not a huge difference, really. Honestly, I think Batrider's still going to be good. Just like making the hero not as crazy good, but still good. Nothing that's going to like break the hero or like make it completely terrible or anything like that. Bloodseeker, just kind of little buffs to the hero, or little nerfs to the hero, which is interesting because I didn't think this hero was all that great. I mean, I think it was good, but I didn't think it was like good enough to warrant even really being touched at all. But I mean, even so, these nerfs are not that big of a deal. Bounty Hunter, they're kind of consistently buffing Bounty Hunter, and he's kind of coming back into the meta, so look for this hero to potentially be a good offlaner, maybe forward position. He just is at a really weird spot, because he always has, like, problems, depending what position. He just doesn't feel like a good support. He can kind of feel useless. Like, you can either snowball a game and just be out of control in the Bounty Hunter as a forward position, or you can just do absolutely nothing. I think they're kind of pushing it as more of an offlaner, but it can feel kind of awkward a little bit as an offlaner as well, because you're kind of playing more like a carry. But hey, base damage increased by 3, that's significant. I don't know if it's going to push Bounty Hunter into the meta, but it's still, obviously this hero just keeps getting buffed and buffed. I think it's similar to Axe in that way. Next we have Brewmaster. So Brewmaster, they changed the Ags, kind of took him out of the meta and stuff, and I just don't think that increasing this Cinder Brew damage is going to do that much to make the hero better. I just don't think the Ags is good enough. Now, maybe I'm wrong about that, and we'll see people actually start picking it in TI, but I don't think it's going to be enough to make the hero relevant. Broodmother, small buffs. I just don't think it's relevant again. I mean, Broodmother might be like a niche pick, but still, I don't think it's going to be relevant. Chen, basically, nerfs to Holy Persuasion, Divine Favor, and to the level 10 talent, because this hero was probably one of the best heroes, if not the best hero. And obviously, I don't think these things like kill the hero at all. I mean, it's small nerfs. It's like bonus damage from 32 to 22. I mean, that's actually a pretty significant nerf. It's like halved at level 1, and then later it's like 10 damage. And then the health regen bonus decreased later on by 2 from 6 to 4. I mean, those are significant, I will say. Like, you can no longer basically, with that 10 damage decrease, I mean, I saw like Chen's trying to solo Roche and just like solo kill cores and stuff. Chen was kind of insane. I think that now Chen is not as good. I still think it's going to be a top pick though. Darkseer, they just buffed the hero, but I don't think the hero's good. I think the fact that they made the Ags the punch now, and you can't just get that like stun, that good stun that you need on the Shard just makes the hero not nearly as good. I just don't think the Shard is as good as it was, like the new one. And then the, having to spend that Ags for that punch. I think the only thing that made Darkseer really viable is the fact that he had that punch, that you got this like free stun, which is pretty cool. Now I just think he's just not as good since then. And in general, I just don't think people should play him in pubs, but I don't think he's going to be good enough with these buffs to actually be in the meta. Then Dawnbreaker has been good for a long time. They keep kind of trying to nerf this hero, but it just hasn't gotten the hero out of the meta completely. So now they're nerfing it again. Basically, Starbreaker with Shard, you obviously have that free movement, and now your movement speed is decreased with that free movement, which I don't think is a huge nerf, but it's significant enough that you're not going to be able to, like, kind of go as far with your Starbreaker. So that is important to, like, make sure that you can aim it correctly. It's going to be a little bit harder to do that. And then you're also not healing nearly as much from heroes when you hit them with your Luminosity passive, which is important. I think mainly this Luminosity buff was one of the biggest things that actually made this hero good, because a lot of the stuff that it already had. They kind of buffed little things here and there, but I think one of the biggest things is they made this heal absolutely insane. Like, you can have like 25% HP, and you go in, you Starbreaker a couple enemies, and you just like pop back up to full HP. So that's obviously a significant nerf. We'll see if those nerfs are enough to get this hero out of the meta. It's already kind of been falling out of the meta a little bit. I mean, it's still pretty good. It's been good for a long time, but we'll see if this is enough to make like core Dawnbreaker completely out of meta for TI. Next, we have Death Prophet. So I briefly mentioned Death Prophet in the tier list, how I got that wrong basically in the last patch, that I thought this hero was going to be absolutely crap because of the change from the percentage-based damage to the flat damage, but it actually makes, even though the hero's worse against tanky or strength heroes, it's way better early game and way better against like everything else, and now it's just completely broken. Probably the most broken hero in the patch, other than Undying, which also got nerfed, a little bit of a spoiler there, but I think Spirit Siphon and Decay with Undying are the most broken spells in the entire game. So it's obvious that this hero should get nerfed for TI, otherwise it would be picked or banned every single game. So they basically increased the cooldown for the Crypt Swarm. The restore time on Spirit Siphon has increased by 8 seconds at max level, which is significant. Actually, they increased it all around by 2 seconds even early, so the whole, it doesn't decrease in cooldown with any levels in it, which is really important. 38 seconds for each charge. I mean, that's a long time. 40 seconds for a cooldown at max level on any normal ability. I mean, that's a long, long time. So I think that's a significant nerf, even though the damage is still insane. It's just you're not going to be able to use them nearly as much. And then Exorcism, the bonus movement speed is decreased, so the hero's not just flying around the map like crazy, especially when it's ulted like it always has been. This hero's just so fast, it's insane. It's like so hard to kill this hero, and now it's a little bit worse. So I don't think this is enough to drop it out of the meta. I still think this is going to be a good hero that people are going to pick in TI. It's just not completely busted. So it's going to be more of like a, it's going to have to actually work and synergize in some way with your lineup. It's not just going to be like a guaranteed first pick kind of thing. Drought Ranger, they've been kind of buffing this hero overall, here and there. I mean, 5 moon speed, not a really big deal. I mean, obviously it's good on the hero. I think it makes the hero better, but it's not that much. Elder Titan, Echo Stomp Shard, reduces cooldown by 2 seconds. It's good buffs, but I don't think it's enough to actually bring the hero into the meta. Enigma's been kind of meta for a long, long time. So now they're nerfing the hero overall. Early Eidolon magic resistance is decreased by a lot, which means it's able to be cleared out by a lot more spells from supports and stuff. So the laning stage for this hero is greatly nerfed, which is really good, because this hero was just, it was so annoying that you just got your range creeps always denied. It would always push back into him. He always got this free farm. Then he has this late game ultimate that you can never count out. So I think nerfing the laning stage for this hero is kind of good, because and with the new shard that they introduced, it obviously made this hero even really good at pushing early to mid game. And so I think that's just too broken. This hero has one of the best late game spells in the game. So I think making its early game worse is a very good idea. Now we'll see if this is enough to get Enigma out of the meta, because, you know, Midnight Pulse damage per second is decreased a little bit, and the bonus health talent decreased at level 15 as well. So there's like little nerfs overall here, but I don't know if this is enough to get Enigma out, but it's been consistently nerfed over and over and over again. People just value it so highly because it just seems to be such a good, like the function of the hero, how the hero is designed, it's just so good that even if it keeps getting nerfed in these little ways, it seems to always pop back up. So I think it's still going to be popular, maybe not as popular, but still popular in the meta come TI. Then we have Faceless Void, the overall best carry of the patch. I think there's probably a reason for that with the Arcana and everything. But, so it kind of makes sense that it was really good, because if you remember, and I said this I think in my tier list and in the last patch update, 7.32, that Faceless Void was already a really good carry, and then they didn't even really nerf the hero. In fact, they buffed it overall. So I think they buffed the Time Walk range without Shard, and then they nerfed the Shard. or something like that, either one. But overall, when you had the shard, you actually had more time walk bonus range than, or like total range than you did before the patch, which was kind of insane because this hero's already good. So now they're just nerfing the time walk range with the shard, which I think makes it about either the same or like 50 less, or maybe it's like 100 less, because now it's from 300 to 150. It's either 100 or 50 less than it was before 3.2. So it's about what it was back when Vasal's Void was still broken. So I don't think that's a huge nerf. I mean, obviously it's important, but this hero's still going to be very good. And then time dilation, just the DPS is just lower overall at level 1, and then it's still going to scale up later levels. I just think this is good to make the laning stage not as dominant, and it's more the fact that you're even doing any damage at all, which cancels blink daggers. That's kind of the important part. So even though you're doing 3 less damage a second level 1, it's not a huge deal, because really the thing is more, I mean, it is a big deal in the laning stage, so just keep that in mind. Obviously, it's a nerf to the laning stage, but later in the game, it's more the fact that you're doing damage at all, and it's like an extra way for this hero to be annoying in fights, and that's still the case, because once it's maxed out, it's the same thing as it was before. You're still canceling blink daggers, all that kind of stuff. And then talents were also nerfed a little bit there, with the attack speed and chronosphere, and the time walk cooldown reduction talent as well, nerfed. So I think this hero's not going to be the S tier, far and away best carry, most broken in the patch. It might still be probably up there as A tier, like one of the best. It's just probably not going to be far and away the best, because I think these are significant nerfs, or significant enough to make it just not completely broken. Kind of like Death Prophet was. It's just like absolutely insane, and now it's just not as insane, but still very good. Grimstroke, just buffs to the hero. This hero's been out of meta. No one's picking it. It's pretty bad. It just has a terrible win rate. So it just needs some love. They kind of been trying to give it more love here and there, but it's just not enough, and it clearly hasn't been enough. So they're giving it a little bit more. I don't think it's enough to actually make it relevant or in meta. Gyro, again, more buffs to the hero, because the hero has just been so bad for so long now. And it's kind of been trending more towards like a support, or, you know, like some kind of magic damage build. But this is basically a buff for the carry version of Gyro, which is very interesting, because they've been kind of trending away from that, but now they're buffing the carry version, because Flat Cannon is like the carry farming spell. So they're buffing that, which is kind of interesting, because I would almost rather see like a buff to something else to make Gyro a better support, or a better offlaner, or better whatever, you know, better magic damage kind of build hero than this. But it's just a buff to the farming, so I don't think that's going to be super relevant. Keeper of the Light has been dead ever since they removed that mid-small camp. And so it's not a mid anymore, and it's also really not a great support. But they did, I mean, this damage increase from 100 to 180 at max level in Blinding Light is significant. But I just don't think that, I just think the meta is just not favoring this type of hero. So I don't think it's going to be relevant to make, or enough to make the hero relevant. Lich has been kind of on the rise, been getting better. And now they're buffing it again. So they're, the base health regen for this hero has doubled. So obviously better in the laning stage. And then the damage talent at 10 for Frost Blast radius and damage was increased. So I think this hero could be a very good support in TI. Look out for this hero to be like a top support. Now, I don't know. Lich has been in a weird spot for a long time. It is kind of an interesting hero. But just look for it to potentially be a top hero. I don't know that it will be. Maybe, you know, it's still not enough to make this hero really good, but I think it's just kind of been gaining and gaining and gaining ground. So look out for Lich in TI, potential to be a very good support, especially because supports, like, you know, if a lot of them get banned, or, you know, depending on matchups, they can always just kind of pop into the meta. Lena's been pretty good. So basically the big thing here is that they just like nerfing her early game, nerfing her laning stage. Ever since they changed the passive, your laning stage has just been really good, because you're able to get all those stacks up extremely quickly by hitting the creep wave with like one Dragon Slave and the hero. You basically almost get max stacks. So now really the big thing about this is this hero has insane range. And the reason why this base armor decrease is important is because what you would do is you would walk up into the lane, you would start right-clicking the enemy from really far away, but then you would aggro the creeps and they would kind of hit you. And now this is like more significant, because your base armor being decreased by 1 means the creeps are going to be doing significantly more damage to you when you try to click the enemy from kind of far away. So it just makes your trading a little bit worse. It makes you not really want to take as much damage from the creeps when you're clicking people. All that kind of stuff is significant to nerf this hero's laning stage. And then obviously not doing as much damage later with this damage talent. But if you look here, Dragon Slave cooldown is another good spell, or another good talent to take. So especially if you're going with the spell route and not just the right-click damage route. So overall nerfs, but I don't think it's like crazy. It just kind of, it makes sense with the hero, because this hero's laning stage was just insane. Lion, kind of in a bad spot, has been for a long time, so they're buffing the cast range on Hex. I don't know if that's enough to actually make Lion relevant. It's obviously nice, but not super important. Magnus here, damage increased on Shockwave, and then a talent buff here. I don't think that's enough to make Magnus relevant, but hey, who knows? Maybe we'll see, you know, Collapse Magnus in TI again, but last year Magnus was completely broken. I don't know that it's going to be the same thing because the Horn Toss still doesn't stun like it did last time. I think that's the big thing that made this hero really good. I just don't know that it's going to be a Magnus patch either because this hero is very passive, farm heavy, and I think that's the opposite of the meta right now. So I don't think that's going to be relevant. Marcy, still broken after the changes in 7.32, and so now they're just nerfing the hero overall. The throw distance on Dispose is decreased, can't pull people out of Black Hole or Chrono, which was super annoying. I don't know why you could have even done that anyway. You can reach your hands into this thing and just pull people out. That was kind of dumb. It's kind of more of like a bug fix, honestly. And then rebound cooldown nerfed a little bit there. Not crazy, but it is enough to make the hero like a little bit worse. And then movement speed and attack speed slow, no longer pierces spell immunity, which is I think something that was definitely needed. It kind of is weird that pierced spell immunity at all in the first place. Kind of a weird thing that even happened. And next we have Meepo here. So Meepo, been out of the meta, been not a really viable hero for so long. So they just keep buffing the hero. The Divided We Stand ultimate now. The Shard, slow is increased, and the damage is increased, and the Dig max health restore, which I think is very important, is now up to 50% from 40%. This hero is always weird because it's like, I feel like they need to change the hero, do something to the hero, because it's just at a really bad spot and has been for so long. I just really don't know what they're going to have to do with it to make it relevant, and it is one of those things, if they keep buffing it, which they do, it might just become broken. So be careful, Valve, because eventually this hero might be broken and ruin everybody's pubs, and who knows, I mean, I don't know. I'm not a Meepo player. I don't know when that tipping point will happen, but when it does happen, it's going to be very, very annoying. Next, we have Nature's Prophet. Mana cost decreased for his ultimate, and then cooldown decreased for his new Shard, I believe that is. So, I don't know. This hero is just really weird. It's kind of at a weird spot because it's been like a carry at times, and it was like broken because of the leash talent on Sprout, and then it's been nerfed, and it's sort of an offlaner, but it's just like a weird spot because it doesn't really have a role that it loves to play. And in the past, with the other Shard, it could play like even support and stuff like that, but now with that gone, it seems to be more of an offlaner or a carry, but I think it's just not as good as it even once was in those roles. So I just don't know that this is going to be relevant to make the hero better or enough to actually, you know, pick the hero. It's still in an okay spot. I think Nature's Prophet is okay, but it's just not that great. Night Stalker, I think this hero is actually pretty good. So the fact that they decreased the cooldown for his ultimate here on the first level and the second level is important. It's not a lot. It's not a huge buff, but it is important. I mean, we saw some people in, I think, the last major, some players, or maybe it was 2 majors ago, I can't remember, do really well with this hero. So I'm just surprised they're actually buffing it. But maybe they want Night Stalker to be a big deal in TI, because I think this could be a pretty good offlane pick in TI. Because they're nerfing a lot of offlaners. They've like been nerfing offlaners for a long time. Like a lot of them. Like a lot of the ranged ones, like Viper, all that kind of stuff. Everything that basically ATF has been playing, they just nerf all of that stuff. So look for Night Stalker to potentially be a big offlaner in TI. Omni Knight, one of the best supports this patch, so it makes sense that they're just going to nerf the hero. The base strength for Heavenly Grace has been decreased, and then the Hammer of Purity cooldown is decreased, or increased. The cooldown is increased by a lot, especially level 1. Now, max level is the same, but level 1, 16 seconds, a lot different than 10 seconds. You could spam this in lane, and it would just, like, so annoying, especially even, like, as an off-lane Omni Knight. You could just spam it on the enemy, and it would do so much damage once you started leveling it up. Now you, like, have to level it up, obviously, so it's going to be the same at max level, but, like, even level 1, you could still, like, spam it. It was just still super really annoying. And it was also obviously good for trading too as a support in lane, but now you're only going to have it every 16 seconds, just not nearly as good. And then the strength decrease is obviously important, but it's only like 6 strength, but that can, you know, that stuff adds up and makes the hero more tanky and your ally more tanky. So these are significant nerfs. I think Omni Knight is kind of one of those heroes that it's either really good or really bad. So, it's hard always to tell where that tipping point is. I don't know if this is going to make the hero relevant, but hey, who knows? It could. Because if the laning stage is not good enough to actually lane the hero, then it could just fall out of favor. Oracle, small buffs on here. I don't think this hero is going to be relevant. It's just such a weird hero. Not really a typical support that you want, so I don't know if this is going to make the hero better. Just buffs on the root duration, whatever. I don't think that's a huge deal. OD, they're buffing this hero because it's been at a kind of a weird spot for a long time. I think it's still a weird hero. It's like wants to buy Meteor Hammer, but then kind of doesn't because now it sort of wants to buy Null Talismans because of the max mana increase. I don't know. Very odd hero. It's fun. I like to play it, actually. I know people hate OD, and I kind of hate playing against OD too, but it is a fun hero to play when you can just like annoy people to death. But they actually buffed the Astral Imprisonment, so the early cooldown on level 1 Astral is that's a very significant buff because now you can kind of spam this in lane a lot more than you could in the past. Obviously, max level, it's still the same, but it makes the laning stage way better for this hero. And I think that is really important. Like, look out for OD off lane to potentially even be a thing. I don't know if it's going to be a thing in TI, but it just makes the hero a lot better. Next is a Phantom Assassin. This is a very interesting buff because obviously this hero was really good after 7.32. It had one of the best win rate increases. It was probably a top carry. Then they nerfed it because they nerfed the stat gain. And they also nerfed the bonus attack speed on the level 10 talent, I believe. I forget exactly how much they nerfed it by. Maybe it was like, or maybe, no, it was the duration of Phantom Strike. They nerfed it like in half. It was like 1.5 seconds or something like that, and they nerfed it in half. It just wasn't as good, and I think they nerfed some of the lifesteal too. I don't know. They nerfed a bunch of things about the hero. It just fell off a cliff. This hero just kind of went down into the 40% win rate. It just wasn't nearly as good. I think it was a lot to do with that stat gain nerfs and the stat overall nerfs, like the just general stats of the hero. That really hurt. And then plus these small talent nerfs and the attack speed or the duration of Phantom Strike. But now the big thing they did here is they gave this hero an improved turn rate, which is always going to be helpful. And then attack speed, the attack speed bonus for Phantom Strike is increased by 5 on the first level and 20 on the max level, which is, I mean, that is a significant buff. 20 attack speed on max level with Phantom Strike. I mean, that's potentially like 1 or 2 attacks for the duration of Phantom Strike. I'm not exactly sure. Someone would probably have to do the math about, like, you know, what point in the game when you have X attack speed and these items, like how many attacks are you getting in? But that attack speed, I mean, I think that would be a couple attacks, and that can be everything for PA. So just look out for PA. PA, I think, is not nearly as crap as she was after those nerfs, and I think she kind of can come back. I think this hero's always a pretty good late game, like, pub stomper, and now it's a lot better than it was. Phantom Lancer, buffs to the hero, but Phantom Lancer's all or nothing. It's kind of like that Bounty Hunter, Axe, you know, whatever. These heroes that I talked about where it just feels like the hero's either terrible in the meta or now really good. I don't know that it's going to be really good, especially with things like Lesh and other stuff like that. I think Lesh could potentially be a good mid laner. Something like Batrider still being relevant. These heroes obviously are not, you don't want to pick a Phantom Lancer into those heroes, those magic damage AoE kind of heroes. And I just don't know that Phantom Lancer, it's kind of like anti-mage in a way where if you can get your farm, if you can have a free game, yes, you can be good and you can dominate late. But the meta of Dota and just how Dota's been shifting over the years is just kind of trending away from that a lot. So I don't know that these cast range increase and movement slow increases on Spirit Lance are really going to be enough to do anything for the hero. Primal Beast has kind of come back into the meta, been a lot more powerful recently. I think it's a very good hero now. I think even before with the nerfs in the past, people just undervalued it, and then because it wasn't in Captain's mode, people just didn't care to play it because it wasn't completely broken. And then they've just been buffing it here and there, so I think it's a pretty good hero now. Now they're decreasing the bonus damage on Uproar early, which is, I mean, obviously max level, it's decreased by 1 point, but whatever, that's not a big deal. It's more that early in the laning stage, just not as insane. You don't get insane damage. You're not as crazy of a laner. But overall, I think this hero is still fairly good. I think it's still going to be picked in TI. It's not going to be the most popular hero, but it's still going to be picked. Pudge overall has been pretty good ever since the change to the passive, and then some buffs that it got after that. And now they just nerfed the level 15 talent, the lifesteal that you get from the spell lifesteal on level 15. I don't think that's enough to make the hero relevant. Still pretty good hero. Pugna, damage per mana multiplier increased on the Nether Ward. Again, I don't think this is enough to make the hero relevant because it's just kind of one of these weird heroes. I think it's still pretty good mid, but unless they make the mid version of Pugna better, which I don't think this does that much, I don't think it's going to be in the meta. I mean, look out for someone like Thompson maybe to play it. I don't know, but I just think this hero's a long way from actually being a top pick. Riki Smokescreen, this is pretty big. I think it's pretty good. Riki obviously had a pretty big increase in win rate, I saw, through various brackets, which is pretty interesting. I mean, Smokescreen is kind of like a broken spell. The spell is very, very annoying. And now, especially level 1, it has the same AoE through every level, the same as it was at max before. That's significant. This hero, like one level in this Smokescreen now, kind of broken. This hero's, the biggest problem with this hero is as a carry, you just don't farm, so you almost like want to buy Battle Fury. It's just relatively slow, and then if you want to buy Diffusal, like you can go pick people off and kill people, but if you're not doing that, you fall off really quick. And then as a support, it just can feel pretty useless. I mean, you can still do that like Shard build with the Dart and Meteor Hammer and kind of stuff like that. It's just that's kind of gimmicky. So again, I don't know if this is going to make this hero good enough to actually be relevant in TI, but I think in pubs it makes the hero pretty good overall. Rubik basically added an indicator for the land portion of the ability where you can actually see where Rubik is going to put the enemy that it picked up, which is important. I think that's actually just good quality of life thing to make. They should have had this all the time. I thought they did have some kind of little thing, but maybe I'm wrong, but it just was so annoying that you never knew where Rubik was going to, telekinesis the guy. Sand King, the slow and caustic finale, is increased. This hero's kind of been in a weird spot. It was like really good like 6 months ago in a patch. It was just like broken, and then they nerfed it a couple times, and now it just fell off. This is not going to be enough to make the hero relevant, though. Shadow Demon, so they changed this hero a little bit. They gave it Disseminate, which is kind of an interesting ability, and they kind of want to make this hero relevant, which I've seen people pick it here and there. We'll see if these buffs are enough to actually make this hero relevant in TI and actually become a pickable hero in TI. I think people just don't really know how to play the hero or the strengths of the hero or the weaknesses of the hero yet because of the change. This is one of these heroes that people don't play that much. So buffs to the hero could be relevant in TI. I think it's all about matchups. Is disruption good? Like if you're disrupting an enemy Luna or something, it's really good. So I think it's a lot to do with that. Shadow Fiend was pretty broken, kind of on the rise as a carry and a mid. That slow stacking with your Shadow Rays was kind of insane, so they nerfed it a little bit there. Level 1, it's still best at level 5, obviously, or level 4, max level. But level 1, it was just way too broken. It was absolutely insane. Did you get 3 raises on somebody, and they're just like, they can't move. It's crazy. So you can first blood people super easily. I was seeing people pick, like, support Shadow Fiend. It was ridiculous. So just not as broken as it was. Silencer, they're making this hero, they're like forcing Silencer into the meta. They're like, we need Silencer to be like a legit hero. They really want Silencer to be real. Like something that people are either picking in TI or like just, they're like, please, somebody pick Silencer, make this hero relevant. So they're increasing this hero's armor by 1, and then Arcane Curse now applies a instant burst damage as soon as it's hit. So I'm pretty sure that just basically means that you can't like blink out, because I think you would curse somebody and then it would take a little bit for the tick to happen. So now you can like, you could blink out before them, but now as soon as you get hit, you take damage, which is important. Then the base armor increase is important as well. I think they're trying to make this hero a mid laner, or some kind of carry even potentially. We don't really have too many like intelligence carries, but I think that's what they're trying to force with the hero. I think that would be really cool if we saw this hero become a real mid or a real carry. I don't know if this is enough, but it'd be cool if that eventually happened. Slardar, they've been buffing this hero over and over and over again. I think this is going to be a big hero in TI from the off lane. It's already gotten tons of buffs, and it's really good right now, I think. Overall, I think people are underestimating. It takes Roche like crazy. You can like perma bash people. You can you obviously get that the puddle from your stun. You get the water that you can chase people down with when you use your ultimate on them. I think this hero's just gotten so many buffs. I think this is going to be relevant now. I'd be very surprised if we don't see this hero in TI, because the bonus river movement speed is increased, and then the stun duration from your bash is now increased at early levels. So you're it's the same maxed out, but early levels is even better now. So this hero I think just overall is better. Slark, so obviously one of my favorite heroes. I just made a guide for the hero, and they nerfed it a little bit because it was really, really powerful. I will say this, Depth Shroud, they decreased the range by 50. I will say this is obviously a significant nerf because this is a very good spell, but I will say this, that the AoE of the spell, like the visual AoE that you see on the ground, was actually smaller than the actual AoE. So if you went and demoed it before this change, you could kind of run outside of the AoE of what you thought the Death Shroud was, and you would still be like kind of invisible. You could see yourself being like weirdly invisible. So now the actual AoE is like more consistent. I think it's a little bit smaller than the actual like animation, but I think it's like more in line with it than it was actually even before that. So even though it is a nerf, visually it almost like doesn't really look as much like a nerf. Like it's hard to tell because before it had bigger range than you actually thought it did, or bigger AoE, bigger radius than you actually thought it did. But it is significant, don't get me wrong. The radius is obviously so it's like it's nerfed by 100 total for the diameter, obviously, because the radius is only half. So 50 for the radius. That's pretty important. It is a pretty big nerf, so don't get me wrong. But it is a very good spell. So I think that's a good nerf. I like that they did that because this spell was one of the reasons that the hero was broken. And then actually the level 10 talent where they nerfed the Dark Pact cooldown from 1 second to half a second. Now if you look at the talents, the one side is half a second Pounce Leash and the other side is half a second Dark Pact cooldown. I think this is one of those scenarios, or could be one of those scenarios, where you kind of nerf one thing about the hero and actually like is an indirect buff in that it forces people to do something different, and that different thing was always better anyway. So obviously I think that the Dark Pact cooldown at 1 second was probably the talent that you would want to take anyway, if it was 1 second. But now that it's half a second, and the fact that you're basically going second item ags every single time because of the change to Pounce, I think this half a second Pounce Leash increase is actually really, really good. And I was surprised and kind of debating whether I wanted to take that anyway because of the ags that you're going to be purchasing in every game. I think this just makes it so that you're going to be taking Pounce Leash every time, and I think it's significant because that's 1 second overall of like Leash with both pounces, and that is just a little bit of extra that gets that extra attack or two in, and that's really good with Slark. Like every attack matters with this hero, so I think you might be going left talent more now. Even though the right talent's good for survivability and farming and stuff, it's half a second. It's kind of like whatever. Spearbreaker, been out of the meta for a long time. I don't think these improvements to cast point are really going to be that big of a deal, especially because Scepter no longer improves cast point. So it's like, yeah, I mean, 0.3 to 0.1 is like, there's not as much of a delay, but like whatever. And then they kind of changed the planner pocket thing because they're just basically fixing it. It does not trigger the redirect if the enemy abilities target at Spearbreaker. It's just basically a fix. So I don't think this is really that big of a deal because it's kind of like a fix and then a small change that's not huge. Techies, I think this hero is like undervalued. I think this hero is very powerful, does a ton of damage. It can be very, very good. I've seen it work in a lot of games. And now the bonus move speed is increased for Reactive Taser. So I think there's a tipping point with Techies like some of those other heroes I mentioned where this hero is actually just going to be in the meta as a support, potentially even a mid laner, once people realize that this hero is actually not bad. I just think people just haven't given it the time to actually try to play the hero. Then we have Tidehunter. Tidehunter is one of those weird ones where even though it's bad or like it could be bad in pubs, it's like potentially good in like all pro games, especially TI. So look for this, these buffs with the Ravage damage increase, which is pretty good. And then the Gush buff duration increase by half a second. Like they're not big changes, but Tide is like a staple of TI, I swear. This hero's picked in TI like all the time. So look for this hero to be a TI pick from the offlane, especially with a lot of other offlaners getting nerfed constantly. Undying. The most broken hero in the patch now is getting a little bit of nerfs. Mana cost increased for Decay, which was the most broken spell in Dota, along with Spirit Siphon from Death Prophet. So now instead of it being 85, 90, 95, 100 mana, it's just 100 flat mana. I think that's obviously a good nerf. I don't think it breaks the hero or makes the hero terrible. It just makes it so you can't spam this as much in lane. Just a little bit more of mana cost. Maybe now you need your soul ring to you need to be using that a little bit more, get your mana boots earlier, but this hero's still broken. Decay is still absolutely insane. Like, yeah, the mana cost is nerfed by 15, but like, whatever, dude. This thing is still ridiculous. And then Tombstone, zombie movement speed slow decreased from 7 to 5, and then the vision decreased from 1800 to 1500. Obviously, it just makes Tombstone not as good, but I think Tombstone, although Tombstone used to be the thing that this hero was, like, it was the spell for the hero. Now, because you're playing more of like a core offlane Undying, Decay and like your ultimate, these are the spells, and Tombstone is almost just like an afterthought. You just kind of put the Tombstone up and you're like, yeah, well, are you going to fight me or the Tombstone? Because you literally can't kill me, and I'm insane, and I'm doing insane damage, and I'm slowing you, and now you also have to deal with the Tombstone. It's just like that combination of those two things makes this hero broken. So they are obviously nerfing it a little bit, but I think this hero is still really good. It's just kind of like with this hero, Death Prophet, some of these heroes, they're just making the hero not absolutely broken, completely first pick, first ban every game, but I think it's still going to be relevant in TI and still very, very good. Venomancer, they're just buffing this hero overall. I think Latent Toxicity, this new shard, is actually pretty good because it stuns like after you Manta, it stuns when you click BKB. I think people are undervaluing this hero. It's just at a weird spot because do you put it at 4? Do you put it as a 3? I think it just feels super awkward. It's like a bounty hunter or something. It's like, what role are you really putting this hero in? Because if you're not snowballing and dominating like a bounty hunter kind of, and just really pressuring the lanes, it can fall off and feel really bad. So I think that's the main problem with the hero, but I think this latent toxicity thing is very good. So look for Veno to potentially be a niche pick in TI, and maybe some Chinese teams will like bring it out and make it look pretty good. Next, we have Viper. Viper's just been so good for so long, so now they're decreasing the poison attack move slow on early levels by a lot. So maxed out, it's still the same, but early levels just not as dominating of a laning stage hero, which is important because, you put this hero in the off lane, it just starts spitting on you. You're like, come on, man, I can't even lane. It's so annoying. It's obviously still going to do damage, but it's just not slowing you nearly enough or nearly as much. So now you can get away a lot easier, which I think is important. Look for this hero to kind of be irrelevant potentially. Visage overall, really, really good hero. Like in the qualifiers, I think even in the last major was a pretty high contested hero. Like obviously it depends if you have a Visage player and if they know what they're doing, but this hero's just been overall pretty good. So the cooldown for Grave Chill was increased. Gravekeeper's Cloak radius was decreased overall significantly actually. Shard max health restored decreased by a percentage, and then familiar movement speed decreased as well. So basically, if you didn't know, so the movement speed for the familiars is important because now they're not moving nearly as fast, and then they actually have to be closer to you, I believe, to actually get your Gravekeeper's Cloak. So you can't just like chase people down infinity range, or else they get very squishy. And then your Grave Chill is just worse in the laning stage and overall, just for cooldown. And then the talent here is obviously a nerf as well for the familiar movement speed. So I think just overall the hero's not as good. It's just not as broken, but I still think like these are just kind of like nerfs to some of the numbers. Like cooldown is decreased by a little bit, 1 second, The familiars can't go outside of the range of your hero nearly as much. It's pretty significant, but still just not as much. And then movement speed slow is like, it's just slower with its movement speed. So I think these nerfs are good, but it's not changing anything fundamental about the hero. So I just think it's not broken as it was before. Warlock, they've been buffing this hero over and over and over and over again, trying to make it meta, but it just hasn't seemed to come about. So now Chaotic Offering decreased the cooldown by 10 seconds. Level 15 talent upheaval attack speed per second on allies increased by 2. And that's still not going to be enough to make the hero relevant, I don't think. I mean, maybe I'm wrong about that. Maybe people will actually start picking it. I think I've seen people pick it in tournaments, but I think it was like the crappier teams were picking it. Like I think Alliance picked theirs. I don't know. Like just not to flame Alliance, but I think some of these other heroes or other teams that like were just not top tier teams were picking it, thinking it's good, and I just don't think it's good. Next we have Wind Ranger. Hero's been out of the meta other than being a support that Seb played, and they're trying to make it more of a core. It was a pretty good core like a year or two ago, and then they nerfed the Ags, I think. I forget exactly what they did, but since then it's just been irrelevant. So now they're making Focus Fire better overall on early levels, which is important because his ability seems absolutely dog shit in the first level. Like it just seems so bad. And then the level 15 talent Power Shot damage reduction increased, which is important. From 10% to 15%, but I don't think this is enough to make the hero relevant because you kind of want to play this hero mid. It's kind of a core, but then this is just not enough to make the hero good. And then Wraith King, last hero on the list, damage increased for his stun by a little bit. Early levels just makes it better in the laning stage, and then his skeleton attack damage at 15 was just increased. I just don't think you really take this that much. You usually take, or no, I think you actually do take that. Maybe they changed these talents. I don't really remember because I don't remember it being the stun duration or the skeleton damage. But yeah, maybe you take that over the stun duration, but I feel like stun duration is always going to be good. Just gets you that extra attack or two in, and that's kind of the point of the heroes. You just stun a guy, you jump on a guy, you just blow him up. So I think you still might take that, but just giving you a way to like split the map. If you are losing, you can't jump in, you just get more skeleton damage. It's more skeleton summon duration and cooldown stuff, and just making you have like different ways of playing the hero, which is pretty interesting. They've been changing this hero weirdly in kind of interesting ways, with some nerfs here, but then some buffs there. I don't know that it's going to be relevant in TI, but I kind of like the hero. I like playing him, so I think he's just better overall, obviously with these buffs. But again, small buffs. So that is the patch 7.32c. This is going to be the TI patch almost 100%. There's just no way they're coming out with another patch after that. And overall, this is just kind of like I said, this is nerfs to Batrider, to Chen, to Dawnbreaker, Death Prophet, Enigma, Faceless Void, Lena, Marcy, Omni Knight, who's another one that they nerfed significantly. Well, they nerfed Shadow Fiend. They nerfed Slark a little bit. They nerfed Undying. They nerfed Viper, Visage, and that's pretty much it. So those are all of like the biggest heroes of the patch, and it makes sense that they nerfed them. And then they buffed all these heroes that were like pretty much in a bad spot that nobody was picking. So like Axe, Bounty Hunter, Darkseer, Elder Titan Drow, Grimstroke, Gyrocopter, Keeper of the Light. Like, they're buffing all these heroes that just have terrible win rates, no one's picking, just to maybe try to get them a little bit more relevant. You know, Oracle, Phantom Assassin was nerfed to the ground, then they kind of brought the hero back a little bit with these buffs. Phantom Lancer, all that kind of stuff. Just like small buffs to heroes that are pretty irrelevant that I don't know that'll make them relevant, but maybe like Veno, you could see that being significant, like Tide, because that's always a staple in TI, those kinds of things. So that is the gameplay update. That's the patch 7.32C. As always, guys, if you like the video, like, comment, subscribe, all of those kinds of things. And if you like these videos and want to see more and want to consider supporting me, always go to my Patreon, and I also offer coaching there as well. So as always, guys, thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next video.